The late afternoon sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Chase Center's media room, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Stephen Curry sat comfortably in his chair, his usual media day demeanor slightly different today. There was something more contemplative in his eyes, a weight that suggested he was about to share something significant. "You know," Curry began, adjusting his position and looking directly at the interviewer, "there's a lot people don't see. A lot they don't understand about what really happens between players when the cameras aren't rolling." The question had been simple enough. What was it really like facing LeBron James throughout their careers? But something in Curry's expression suggested this wouldn't be the typical diplomatic response about respecting a great competitor. Outside, the Bay Area's characteristic fog was beginning to roll in, creating an almost ethereal backdrop to what was unfolding in the room. Curry paused, seeming to gather his thoughts, his fingers unconsciously tapping the rhythm that had become his signature three-point celebration. "LeBron and we've been through something together that I don't think many people would understand," he continued, his voice carrying a sincerity that made everyone in the room lean forward slightly. "The media loves to paint this picture of this intense rivalry, this animosity between us, and don't get me wrong, when we step on that court, we're going at each other with everything we've got." He smiled then, but it wasn't his usual confident grin. This was something deeper, more reflective. "But there's another side to this story, a side that happened away from all the noise, all the cameras, all the expectations, and I think it's time people knew about it." The interviewer, sensing the gravity of the moment, simply nodded, allowing Curry to continue at his own pace. The room had grown quiet except for the distant sounds of traffic on 3rd Street and the occasional foghorn from the bay. "It was 2016, Curry began, his voice taking on the tone of someone about to share something precious. "Right after we lost to Cleveland in the finals. That series changed everything for both of us. 3 days after the Warriors' devastating Game 7 loss to the Cavaliers, Stephen Curry sat alone in his Atherton home, still processing what had happened. The house was unusually quiet. Aisha had taken the girls to visit. Her parents, sensing that her husband needed some space to work through his emotions. The 73-win season, the unanimous MVP award, the best regular season record in NBA history, all of it felt hollow now. Curry stared out at his backyard, the Northern California sun beating down on the perfectly manicured lawn, but he barely noticed the beauty around him. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost let it go to voicemail, but something made him answer. "Steph?" The voice was unmistakable even, though it was softer than Curry had ever heard it. "LeBron?" "Yeah, man. Look, I know this might be weird, me calling you right now, but I had to. I couldn't just let this sit." Curry sat up straighter, completely caught off guard. In all their battles, all their interactions, this was the last thing he expected. "I wanted to tell you something, and I wanted to tell you when it was just us. No cameras, no media, no teams around us," LeBron continued. "What you did this season? Man, that was special. That was something I've never seen before in this league." The sincerity in LeBron's voice was undeniable. Curry found himself speechless, a rare occurrence for someone usually so composed in interviews. "I know you're hurting right now," LeBron went on. "I know because I've been there. I've had those moments where everything you worked for feels like it just slipped away. But I need you to hear this from me. What you accomplished this year, that's legendary." "Stuff, brother." "LeBron, I don't know what to say," Curry managed, his voice slightly shaky. "You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know that what happened in that series, that wasn't about disrespecting you or what you built. That was about me trying to bring something home to Cleveland. But it doesn't take away from what you are, what you've done." The conversation lasted another 20 minutes. They talked about the pressure, about carrying expectations, about what it meant to be the face of franchises and cities. LeBron shared stories about his early finals losses, about how he'd learned to channel disappointment into motivation. "The thing is," LeBron said, as their conversation began to wind down, "people want us to hate each other. They want this to be personal, bitter. but I see too much of myself in you, and I respect what you've built too much for that." When Curry hung up the phone, he sat in silence for several minutes. The call had lasted less than half an hour, but it had shifted something fundamental in how he viewed not just LeBron, but their entire dynamic. The revelation about that phone call was just the beginning. As Curry continued his story in the Chase Center media room, the weight of years of untold moments seemed to flow out of him. "That call opened something up between us," Curry explained, his hands now clasped together as he leaned forward. "It wasn't like we became best friends overnight, but there was this understanding, this recognition of what we were both carrying." He described moments that had never made highlight reels or social media posts, like during the 2017 playoffs, when LeBron had quietly approached Curry's father, Dell, after a game in Cleveland. "My dad told me later that LeBron had pulled him aside and just said, 'Your son is special. I know we're competing against each other, but I want you to know how much I respect what he's doing.' That meant everything to my father, and it meant everything to me." The fog outside had grown thicker, and the lights in the media room had automatically adjusted, casting a warmer glow over the scene. Curry's voice took on an even more personal tone. "Then there was the incident with Riley," he continued, referring to his eldest daughter. "This was during the 2018 finals. Riley had been getting some really nasty stuff on social media. You know how people can be when they're passionate about their teams. She was just a kid, and some of the comments, were really hurtful." Curry paused, the memory clearly still affecting him. "Somehow LeBron found out about it. I don't know how. Maybe through mutual friends, maybe through his own kids who follow social media closely. But before Game 4, he came up to me during warm-ups." The memory seemed to transport Curry back to that moment in Cleveland, the hostile crowd, the pressure of the finals, and then this unexpected gesture of humanity. He just said, "Man, I heard about what people are saying about Riley. That's not right. Kids should be off limits always." And then he did something I'll never forget. He went over to where my family was sitting, and he spoke to Riley directly. He told her she was brave and strong, and that he was proud of how she handled herself. Curry's voice caught slightly as he continued, "My daughter lit up. This man who was supposed to be our enemy, who Cleveland fans were cheering for, took time out of his finals preparation to make sure my little girl knew she was valued and protected." The interviewer, moved by the story, asked softly, "How did that change your perspective on your rivalry?" "It made me realize that what we have isn't really a rivalry in the traditional sense," Curry replied. "It's a competition between two people who genuinely respect each other, who understand the responsibility we have not just to our teams, but to the fans, to the kids watching us. We both take that seriously." As Curry reached the final part of his revelation, the atmosphere in the room had completely transformed. What had started as a standard media interview had become something much more intimate and profound. "The last story I want to share happened just this past season," Curry said, his voice carrying the weight of recent memory. "We were in LA and I was going through a really tough stretch, not just basketball-wise but personally. There were some family health issues I was dealing with, some stuff that wasn't public." He took a deep breath, gathering himself before continuing. "I was having one of those days where everything felt overwhelming. You know how it is, when you're trying to be strong for your family, strong for your team, strong for everyone who looks up to you, but inside you're struggling." The vulnerability in Curry's voice was palpable. This was far from the confident superstar persona the public was used to seeing. "I was sitting in the visiting locker room at Crypto.com Arena about 2 hours before the game. Everyone else was either getting treatment or going through their pre-game routines, and I was just sitting there trying to center myself. And LeBron walked in." Curry shook his head, still seeming amazed by the memory. "He didn't say anything at first. He just sat down next to me, and after a few minutes he said, 'Whatever you're carrying right now, you don't have to carry it alone.' That's it. Nothing more." He sat with me for maybe 10 more minutes, not talking, just being present. The simple power of that gesture wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Before he left, he told me something I'll never forget. He said, What we do out there matters, but who we are to each other when nobody's watching, that's what really matters. That's the legacy. Curry looked directly into the camera then, his message clearly intended for a broader audience. People always want to know about our rivalry, about the competition, about who's better. And look, when we step on that court, we're going to compete as hard as we can. We're going to try to beat each other. And we're going to give everything we have for our teams and our cities. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But what I want people to understand is that it's possible to compete at the highest level and still have deep respect for your opponent. It's possible to want to beat someone and also want to see them succeed as a person. Lebron taught me that. He showed me that greatness isn't just about what you accomplish on the court, it's about how you lift up the people around you, even when they're trying to beat you. The interview was winding down, but Curry had one final thought to share. Years from now, when people look back at this era of basketball, I hope they remember the games, the championships, the competition. But I also hope they remember that behind all of that was a friendship built on mutual respect. That two people from very different backgrounds found a way to honor each other while still being fierce competitors. He smiled then, the first truly relaxed smile of the entire interview. LeBron probably doesn't even know I'm sharing these stories today, but I wanted people to know because I think the world needs more examples of how to compete with respect, how to be rivals and still be human beings who care about each other. As the interview concluded and the cameras stopped rolling, Curry sat quietly for a moment, looking out at the Bay Area fog that had now completely enveloped the Chase Center. He had just shared something deeply personal, something that revealed not just his relationship with LeBron, but his own growth as a person and competitor. The stories he'd shared painted a picture far different from the narrative that had dominated sports media for years. Instead of bitter enemies, here were two men who had found a way to honor both competition and humanity, who had discovered that the greatest victories sometimes happen away from the scoreboard. In revealing these untold moments, Curry hadn't just changed how people might view his relationship with LeBron James. He had offered a different way to think about rivalry itself, one where respect and competition could coexist, where opponents could also be allies in the deeper game of life. The fog continued to roll in from the Pacific, wrapping around the arena like a gentle embrace, as if the Bay Area itself was acknowledging the significance of what had just been shared. Sometimes the most important stories are the ones that happen when nobody else is watching. And today, Stephen Curry had chosen to bring those stories into the light.